Do not quench the Spirit. Do not despise the words of prophets. Test everything, but hold fast to what is good. Abstain from every form of evil. May the God of peace himself sanctify you entirely, and may your spirit and soul and body be kept sound and blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. One who calls you is faithful, and he will do this. Here ends the reading. What a joy. Loving family, kind friends, who make life good. And what about the precious animals in our lives? Can't you just picture them at their silliest and most affectionate? The ones who entertain and love us. But you know what animals and humans have in common? They both need training. You think those nice people and animals just come ready, nice, and adorable? Some may have been easier than others, but some, well, they never did seem to get it. And I wonder, just how in the world did Siegfried and Roy get those tigers to jump through flaming hoops and obey their many other commands? What goes on behind the scenes at rehearsals? What happens, for example, when some large carnivorous mammal starts behaving badly? Well, what does a trainer do when, say, a beluga whale spits a godhead? Or a tiger takes a growling bite? Or a monkey quips unpleasant biomaterial at the trainer's head? You see, I didn't say a bad word, biomaterial. While we might immediately dial back to cartoon images of a lion tamer with a whip and a chair, it turns out that the techniques that good animal trainers use don't involve the application of force or punishment. When faced with a wicked whale or a foul-tempered feline, the best response to bad behavior is, well, no response at all. Trainers call this the least reinforcing scenario. If a whale spits on you, we all know how that is. Well, maybe not. But if you react by yelling or jumping about, you become the whale spit bullseye. Every time he sees you at the edge of the tank. Reinforcing badly. Reacting badly reinforces bad behavior. If you have a dog at home, you know this is true. If the dog begs for 15 minutes with sweet puppy dog eyes, no. 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 Oh, well, okay. Just a little bit. I ain't giving, just to salvage your own guilt. You just that dog that persistence pays. We think about our children and teaching them that persistence pays. This technique works amazingly effectively on kids and spouses too. Go passive on the other hand, ignore the behavior, and you taught the animal and human critters, well, some of them anyway, that there's no payoff coming for the whining or puppy dog eyes. At least in theory. I always like to say at least in theory because, boy, when you get to the application, it just doesn't seem to pan out the way that the lecturer up front said. They're so convincing when they present this stuff, and there's truth to it. But it just always seems to be 6 steps too far behind what's actually taking place. But at least in theory, you've created a different scenario. Thank God for kindly trained animals and people. And in a bit, we'll talk about our personal training. As for Paul's grand advice, yeah, I'm going to spin around for a while, then I'll get to Paul. After all, you got to fill out the time slot, right? Or maybe get us focused enough that we're willing to listen to Paul. First, let's hear from Amy Sutherland, a writer who's studying animal trainers, when she came to the realization that the behavior modification techniques that trainers use on wild animals were quite applicable to training human animals, like lazy husbands, hyper kids, or crazy bosses. Her book, What Shamu Taught Me About Life, Love, and Marriage, is a witty and wise look at how we can deal with bad behavior in human relationships. Her 3 rules for dealing with misanthropic managers are pretty much the same kinds of rules that Paul gives to us in Thessalonians. At the close of his letter, rules for dealing with inappropriate behavior. There's a lot we can learn from both Shamu and the Scriptures. Sutherland's first rule is one we've already gone over. When an irritable mammal unloads on you, it's best to ignore the behavior. Animal trainers rarely use punishment as a technique these days. It just doesn't pay off. It's counterproductive. It's reinforcing the wrong behavior. And there are only so many times that you can hit an elephant. Yeah. Just think about it. How many times can you hit an elephant before you end up as a pancake? It's a good book. Read it sometime. Water for Elephants. The elephant eventually has enough.
Don't give the ending away.
Okay. Sutherland claims that punishment and angry reactivity in the workplace offer the same kind of results. Let's say someone's boss is a yeller. And if you yell back at him, or immediately slink off back to the office to cry, you'll always be the target of that boss's tantrums. If, on the other hand, you choose the least reinforcing scenario and make like a statue, showing indifference to the ranting, they put the pin back in the grenade. In theory. After a moment of non-response, one continues a conversation as though the tantrum never happened. She suggests that non-reaction approach works with kids throwing a fit in a grocery store too. Boy, grocery store kids. I'm not sure. I'm a believer in any technique. It seems that you're already arrived there, and boy, reprogramming is difficult. When we choose not to be reactive, we diffuse the situation and train others that there's a better way to behave. Which brings a memory of our own children, our wonderful little children. In the restaurant, 3 kids, my parents, and my brother, older than me, but unmarried. And they were in rare form. Except for Mari. Mari was always well behaved. And then there was Lori. Crying about this, crying about that. And David, you just could never stop him from moving and messing, you know? And I know later my brother's comment to my parents was, why don't they control their kids? When I had children, it's not going to be like that. No, they were worse. And how do we feel about that? Well, okay, that doesn't fit my sermon, does it? Attitude. Seems to me that at this point in the game, bad behavior has been abundantly reinforced by all of us previously clueless trainers. So, The children survived us, we survived them. Hey, they get over it, sort of. And always, don't forget that thing always underlying behavior, sin. Another story. The Apostle Paul gives similar advice. See that none of you repays evil for evil, he says. Well, I don't repay evil for evil. I just think about it. And sometimes it expresses itself in devious ways. But always seek to do good to one another and to all. Well, it's so tempting to tell off a belligerent boss, or throttle an insensitive spouse, or handcuff out of control children. It's self-control that really matters. Got a lovely picture of a little kid. This much of his face is showing above the plate that has the cookies piled on. That's just cruel. Self-control that really matters for every one of us. Always comes back to self, doesn't it? I want to modify your behavior. But God says, why don't you try modifying your own behavior first? Revenge escalates bad behavior, while a non-anxious approach encourages a different scenario with potentially better outcomes for all. See, there you go. You're talking about my behavior. Okay, so move on to the second rule of animal training. And rule 2, always remember that any interaction is training. Well, ignoring bad behavior is the first rule. It's important to realize when we're contributing to that behavior. See, there you go. Talking about my behavior again. Let's say that your boss dumps work on you at the last minute because he or she knows you'll get it done. When we accept it without comment or protest, we're training the boss to believe that you will pick up the slack from his or her poor training for planning. And what happens? She'll be there to pick up the slack. Every time we engage in a relationship with someone, we're training that person through our reactions. Paul makes it clear to the Thessalonians that there's a need for setting boundaries in the community as well as challenging poor behavior. Ooh, not all sweetness and doormat behavior. Admonish the idlers, says Paul. Don't let them freeload, but train them to do their share of the work. Yeah, I can get into that. But always encourage the faint-hearted and help the weak. Training them toward wholeness by interacting positively and optimistically with them. Like you're talking about my behavior, how I respond, how I react. Be patient with all of it, says Paul.